Yeah.
retain it without a sticker.
This. Did you move? I
Yeah,
didn't hear.
yeah, that was
I
a
didn't
motion.
hear that move.
Sorry.
And second, all in favor of that motion, aye? And those opposing or those abstaining? That motion carries. Thank you. Thanks, Michelle. You were awesome.
Yes.
Now, repealing the skateboard ordinance.
Yes.
And the minute we have somebody crash into a car, what are you gonna say?
Yeah, you know what, I did kind of wonder about that. You know, it's really.
She
Is it
has,
causing
she
any
has a
harm?
parking lot.
Okay, let's not repeat the parking lot story.
But the
It's
parking lot
not-
is radically changed from when this was necessary because it had features that lent
Like high
themselves
curbs.
to a little bit more abuse.
Life experience has exposed me to kids, if they put their mind to it, they're gonna find a way.
This is
And
true.
I guess, to me, having the sign up doesn't cause a problem. I mean, there's no issue having the sign up, right?
Well, I'll tell you my initial thought behind it was that we have talked as part of our planning process that we want to really be inviting to young people who we tend to lose at the age where they get more involved in things like skateboarding and inline skates, etc. And I think that this is less than inviting to people who would do that. And I'm not sure that the space that we provide warrants this kind of notice about it. So that was my thought behind proposing, and I'm open to discussion about it. I don't.
And my thought is taking the sign down invites us to liability. Opens us up to liability on our insurance.
Okay.
So, to me, I can understand that, you know, the configuration is set up where this is probably not gonna happen.
Right. There are no internal curves anymore.
Right. Can it happen? Can some kid figure out some way how to get around that and make that work? I mean, maybe. You know, it's one in a million.
And our insurance company does not have any feeling one way or the other as
They're
far as
neutral
the,
on it.
they're neutral on the idea of the sign. To them, its effect on whether or not an incident happens is,
It's
It-
neutral.
Well, and
I
does
don't
it
find
change
that
our liability
binding.
No.
having it versus not having it?
No, and particularly in the current configuration of the parking lot where the difference between what is actually owned by the library versus what is owned by the village is, well,
Blurred
maybe
lines?
a very
Perhaps.
blurred line.
Yeah.
It's pretty much all treated as public property, and anyone can do anything, and as we know from being a public building, they frequently will figure out anything that you've never seen before.
Hmm.
I don't feel it's uninviting. I feel it's a rule and we're all, you know, we have all kinds of
Subject
rules
to
in the
rules.
library and that's fine.
And for our young people in the audience, this is about the sign that's out in the parking lot that says, by ordinance 1977-1, use of skateboards, inline skates, roller skates, and other similar devices is prohibited on library premises by library ordinance number 1977-1, violators subject to a fine.
I mean, I've seen inline skates inside buildings, you know, they put them on the bottom of their shoes and they take off.
What is,
Right.
maybe one of you can explain to me, I've seen some young people with something that they kind of wobble on and get it going, whatever it's
Ripstick?
called.
It's a ripstick.
Okay,
Ripsticks.
because that's kind of the newest thing out,
It's
is it?
kind of like, it's been around for a while, but it's like a skateboard where you just get on, it's got two wheels, and you just kind of like lean back and forth and it moves.
Yeah, it's like
Shift
kind
over,
of, you have to move your leg side to side and
Yeah,
stuff, it just goes.
self-propelling.
It just seems like I've seen a lot of them, well, because there's no snow on the ground, in the last couple of weeks,
It tends to
and
be popular with like younger than us.
that's what I was
Yeah,
gonna
it's
say.
like-
It looked like
like
maybe
10-year-olds
9,
usually.
10, 11-year-olds.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
before they get to the skateboard.
Yeah.
My brother was the same way, he had a
Exactly.
ripstick and then he moved to skateboard, longboard. He comes around frequently, so this,
Well, you know, one of the concerns I have is whatever you call that knobby red stuff out there.
Yeah,
Oh, the foot massager walk?
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm thinking that that might create a problem if you were to get hung up on that.
Or that might solve the problem and
They
discourage
turn their
people
head.
from wanting to try and skate across it in the first
That
place.
is a feature of the newer
I know that.
sidewalks that
Oh, yeah.
helps to encourage the use of the local skate parks.
Any other comments? Where are
You
you?
were just, she was just saying about the fact that we don't know exactly where the line is in terms
Yeah.
of the village versus our place.
You could go on.
And maybe at this point, we don't want to, throw in any kind of ripples in that relationship if they want to question why we take it down. I mean, I don't know if this is the time to do that, considering what kind of feedback we're asking for and what kind of pleasantries. So I only throw that out as a consideration.
Jason, Vicki, anything?
I feel like this one might be something that we table for until the next meeting at least, just to think it over before we do anything, before we could take a vote on it, get a chance to really think about it.
I know a lot of kids get around from area to area.
Sure they do, yeah.
Because it's faster.
Mhm.
So once they get here, what do they do then?
carry their skateboards in.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
carry them. As long as they're carried, it's okay. We don't, as long as they don't try to actually ride them in the building, they're all right. They've also been known,
I was gonna say, you get like 15 feet and then you have to pick it up anyway.
yeah, the common place to actually stash them is behind the little low wall. We have the, what would you call it? Yeah.
So we don't discourage it.
Yeah, the wall behind the flagpole.
Oh, okay.
So have we ever actually fined anyone
No.
based on this policy?
Well, good.
In my 15 years as the library director, probably a handful of times we've actually had to go out and ask someone to leave. And none of those have been since the parking lot redesign.
Well, I think I'm going to take Jason's suggestion that we make that a motion to table it and really give it some thought at this point. And so we can consider that a motion.
Yeah.
Okay, is there a second to that motion? Moved in second, all in favor of that motion, aye?
Aye.
Those opposing, those abstaining, that motion carries, so that we will table it another time. And.
Oh, I'm doing this from over here.
Okay.
We've got
All right.
the,
Tax increment financing districts.
actually, let's see, yep. There, you can put it on play. All right, so, the board asked me to do a few minutes on the tax increment financing. This is a special kind of taxing district that the municipality can create that funds redevelopment opportunities.
Can I just preface this with the fact that there's a lot of talk out in the community about what this is and how it will harm the library if we go ahead with this, and I just think we need to have the right skinny on this.
Chair so you can see the slides.
So,
Yeah.
it seems
So-
confusing.
The board had asked me to do this presentation, and it's going to be informational only. If anybody needs specific information about the Route 30 TIF district that is being proposed by the Village of Plainfield, please direct those questions to Brian Murphy, the village administrator. He would be happy to talk to you about any of this. He and I did talk extensively. I kept double checking with him that I was getting all of the statutory bits of this presentation correct. So what we're going to focus on here is the concept behind TIF districts, the statutory process, and the role of this board in that process. Many of the slides are actually from a presentation made by the Illinois Tax Increment Association's TIF 101 presentation that has been done at another number of other municipal governments, etc. So if I use a slide verbatim, you'll see their actual little logo will be down in the corner. I've also taken some pieces from Cook County's TIF FAQ. In general, TIFs aren't new. They are not unique to Illinois. They started in California in the 1950s and are in use in 49 states and the District of Columbia. Arizona is the one state that doesn't use them. Illinois has used them for over 30 years, and the law has been changed and amended numerous times. So today's TIFs are all based on property values. There used to be other kinds of TIFs. They are all just making the statute longer and more difficult to follow at the moment until the last of them expire from existence and then can be removed from the statutes. The bottom line is the municipality uses this process to make an investment to increase property value in a specific area. They then use that property value growth to pay for the investment that they've already made, and as the growth continues, then they continue to reinvest that, and we'll talk about how that works. This last bullet point here, that's the vital cycle, is that you continue to reinvest that money again and again. Once the growth is sustained, the TIF ends. This has been one of the arguments against TIF districts because in Illinois, the default duration of a TIF district is 23 years. It does allow for it to end prior to that 23-year date, but there are some specific requirements to that. But that duration is sometimes pointed to as a reason not to do that. So, how a TIF works. You establish your TIF project area. That is all the properties that are included in the area as defined in the redevelopment plan. Then your base is the equalized assessed valuation of the properties that are included in that TIF district area at the time it's established. In the subsequent year, when the value of that property is calculated, the increase in the value over the base is called the increment. And that is the increment that is used to pay for the investments in the project area. Your increment can be what is called full capture, which is 100% of that difference is used, or it can be a lesser amount. Currently, the suggested amount is actually 75%. So let's look at this graphically. So when you first take it, this is your base. That's the amount of value of the property included. This would be your first year. So year one, you see it's gone up. So this piece would be the increment. So if this is a full capture TIF, the space between the black and the red line, that would be the increment, would go to the municipality to pay for the investments. If we were in a non-full capture, if you were doing 75%, there would be another line over here that would show this part of the increment would be what was used to pay for the investment, and your taxing bodies would get the remainder of the difference. Once the full capture TIF was the norm, today they are not, and most of your examples of TIF abuse come from full capture TIFs, where for 23 years your taxing bodies that are overlapping districts are unable to access any of that increase. So now we're looking at a little bit different, because there would actually be a second line between that base and the full increment. So numerically, if you think about this, if the property in the TIF district increases in value $1 million from 1 year to the next, then in a 75% captured TIF, $750,000 of that value would go to the village portion of the TIF district, so they would get that piece of the money, and $250,000 of that value would be added to the equalized assessed valuation for each of the overlapping taxing bodies. In a full capture TIF, if your increase is $1 million in valuation, the TIF district is the only one that sees that full $1 million increase in the value of the property as it's figured for the property taxes on that area. I know, probably clear as mud. So,
Can I ask one?
Sure.
one quick question? So the bodies outside of the municipality who create the TIF continue to receive tax monies on that base
Yes.
EAV?
yes,
Plus any difference if it is a percentage-based TIF?
yes.
So it's not that all money's disappearing, it's only on the increase? Okay, thank you.
Exactly, and that is something that has been very unclear in a lot of the commentary about TIF districts and the way the property taxes are figured on the properties included in a TIF district. It is not giving away the full amount of the value of that property to the TIF district. It is the difference between the base and the current valuation in each of those 23 or possibly less years.
So is a TIF district set up within the budget of a village?
It is actually separately governed, and we'll
That's
get
what-
to that part.
That was the part that I
All right,
was
so
kind of struggling with.
what happens according to the law to create a TIF? The process can be divided into 3 parts: planning, feedback, and approval. The process can end at any of these points if the municipality chooses not to pursue it any further. And it usually takes 6 to 8 months from the very beginning of a planning process to actual final approval by a municipality. So you start with determining whether or not your area is eligible according to the requirements for the kind of TIF that you're looking at. And then, if it meets that statutory requirement, then you go on, the municipality goes on, hires a consultant that does a full study of the area and writes a redevelopment plan that includes a project budget and a lot of other very specific requirements. We'll get to that a little more specifically in a minute. That's where the village of Plainfield is today with the Route 30, is in that planning. So the second step is feedback. If a redevelopment plan is approved by the municipality, what they do is they file it with the village clerk, and it starts that 45-day minimum window for the public hearings. At that time, they also have to open what's called an interested party registry. And that's where community members and other organizations that want to know what's going on with the TIF process can go to the municipality and register, and then by law they have to receive notifications of all of the things that are going on through that specific period. That second bullet point, this is your role as a library board in the TIF creation process. It is the joint review board, and that is where all the various taxing bodies that overlap the proposed plan area. So remember, there is now an actual redevelopment plan that is placed for public inspection, so that you have that to look at and to give an opinion and a recommendation. So each of the taxing bodies that overlap the area defined in the redevelopment plan, have a representative on the joint review board. There are also municipal officials on there, there's some others, there's a provision for a community member, etc. And this group gives an opinion and a recommendation to the municipality. But be very clear, this entire process is controlled by the municipality. You give input, but you don't get a vote.
It's strictly an opinion.
It's strictly an opinion and a recommendation. There is also the public hearing, which is, again, opinion and recommendation to inform the approval process undertaken by the municipality. And then last comes the approval. If they get through the entire, last slide, all the way through the public hearing, within all of the statutory requirements, and the municipality continues to move forward with creation of a TIF district, they have to go through their regular process for passing an ordinance. So whatever their usual process is, which generally includes at least one more opportunity for public comment, they have to do that on the ordinance itself to create the TIF district. So, look at those pieces. Eligibility requirements. You have to identify your area, it's got to be big enough. And it must meet the blighting requirements. Documented, meaningful, reasonably distributed in the area, but they don't have to be every parcel included in the district. And we'll go over these a little bit more in a minute. The but-for requirement is key in deciding on any TIF, and that is the requirement that but for public investment in the area, this property will not improve. It will not show an increase in value but for public investment there. That and the blight are the two key factors in showing public purpose for creating a TIF district. So those are huge, those are big pieces of the redevelopment plan itself, is laying out that case for why this area actually needs this investment of public dollars. And then there are some other requirements depending on what kind of TIF that you're doing. And some types of TIFs have additional requirements. The next one is the 4 different categories of TIFs. There are developed, undeveloped, conservation, and industrial park conservation. What this does is it just changes which list you have to pick at least 2 from here and 2 from there. And each one is laid out in the statute in detail. The blighting factors, and this would be the one that Route 30 would fall under, would be an improved area, and these would be the kinds of blighting factors they would be looking for. The last one, the decline in total equalized assessed value in 3 of the last 5 years. That's a huge piece. If you're talking about an area that's either stagnant in its value or decreasing in value, that is a major factor in calling it blighted. And then the next one is about undeveloped land, and you have to do 2 from column A and 1 from column B, and the developed areas are, I know.
It's like granimals.
You
You gotta put together the right picture.
combination. And this is one of the reasons that there are companies that do nothing but these kinds of studies. That's why you bring in a consultant, because you have someone who's an expert in what it really means and what all of these statutory requirements really mean in practice. There are other requirements in the TIF. If you have a significant amount of residential within the TIF area, there has to be a feasibility study about relocations and a housing impact study. the big one on the other requirements is actually the second bullet point, that is the actual redevelopment plan. That is required in any TIF district, and it's the piece that we need to look at. You also have to do all the various pieces. So, in the redevelopment plan and program, that sets out the specifics of the project, and it contains key information for overlapping taxing bodies like ours. This is where you're taking, where you're going to get the information you need as a board of an overlapping taxing district to look at what does this mean for us? What are the impacts? And that actually has to be documented. The evaluation of fiscal and programmatic impact on taxing bodies. So they have to figure out what it's going to do to the library and the park district and the school district and what that will mean for the value of the properties within that district and how much the different districts could expect to capture under whatever program they are suggesting. And one of the things that they have to do is lay out the entire project plan from the budget all the way through the process to change the plan in the future. So they have to have all of the pieces laid out in this redevelopment plan before they show it to you. They need to have, okay, what kinds of projects will they do? How much do they think it's going to cost? What will the process be to change what those projects included in the plan are? And they also have to show that it conforms with the overall municipality's comprehensive plan. So they can't just go out of left field. They have to make it work with the things that they've already said that are their priorities as a municipality. So within the plan, there are only certain costs that can be included. Things like job training, but the big ones, and the administration of the TIF itself is one of those costs. So the village can pay itself back for the time that they spend dealing with this and all of its administration. Property acquisition. Who remembers the Bocce building acquisition? That is a TIF district. TIF funded for the downtown TIF. They use that money to buy that property and rehabilitate it. It's also for construction of public works or improvements. Parking lot plan. Our parking lot expansion and redesign was part of the downtown TIF. Okay, so there are always some restrictions. This is the small print on the statute. There are things like the first bullet point can be huge if you have a lot of TIF districts in an area. That you can actually port. You can transfer TIF dollars from one TIF to an adjoining TIF. But in the village of Plainfield, we only have one TIF district currently here in the downtown. They would not be adjoining, so this would not be a consideration for us. And there is, down at the very bottom, the 23 years is supposed to be the limit, but the legislature can be asked to extend the life of a TIF district.
How old is this TIF district now? Because it's been around.
1998 was the beginning of the downtown TIF. The legislature is notorious for doing this for TIF districts in Cook County.
Okay.
That doesn't surprise me. That was one of my questions, is how many of these TIF districts have actually ended when they were supposed to? Or does this end up like the toll roads, where as soon as the roads were paid off, the toll roads were supposed to end, and now we just pay more every year?
In the collar counties, they generally end on time. And Cook County has its own. As you can see, typical kinds of TIF projects, we've already pointed out a couple of them that have been big for us. The purchase of the Bocce building, our the streetscape, and actually the cleanup of the streetscape is another TIF district project. So, the impact on other taxing bodies that has to be within that redevelopment plan. The requirements, if they're responsibly met, there should be little to no impact on